Salam, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, so we're at part two now. So, what I would like to do is to just move into the conversation around Islamic investments and asset classes. And, when we talk about asset classes, sometimes the term itself can be a bit intimidating. So, what I would like for you to do is maybe just break it down for our audience and try to simplify, some of the types of investments that people, without providing investment advice, but the types of investments that people can actually invest into.
Okay, so I'll try and keep it at a high level and at a level that hopefully your audience can relate to. So think about it this way: there are basically two major kinds of investments at its highest level of abstraction. The first one is an income investment. So think about it this way: you buy, you have a property, and you have a tenant, and the tenant is paying your rent, and that is generating an income. Your primary intention in having that property is to generate an income. So we call that kind of investment. Yes, it's property, but specifically you have it there for what? For income. Mm-hmm. So that's investment type number one, an income generating investment. The other kind of investment is one that doesn't necessarily give you income. You're not buying it for income. You're buying it because actually you are hoping that you're going to get growth on that particular investment. So we call that a growth investment. Something where you think you buy it for 100 and you think that at some point in time you can maybe sell it for 200, right? But in the first instance, you bought it for 100, but all you want to have rental income on that property. Now, when we look at what we call these asset classes, as we call it in investment jargon, but I'm trying hard to stay away from the jargon, we basically once again have these two kind of investments. It is either a growth asset, one that we think is going to appreciate quite significantly, and that can be shares on the stock exchange, whether that be on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, whether that be on global stock exchanges, right? Whether that be, or it could even be commodities, right? For example, gold, platinum, right? It could even be Bitcoin. So these are things that we think are going to go up significantly. Those are what we call growth investments. On the other hand, you have other investments, the income investments, and these can be things like not only property, which gives you an income stream, what we call a yield, an income stream. It could also be things like sukuks, right? Which are, let's call them Islamic bonds, for want of a better word. And it can be any kind of potential investment where your primary objective is just to generate an income. So these are the major, what I would call asset classes. Within those two buckets, growth or income, you have other sub-asset classes: equities, global equities, commodities. You can even have specialist property that you think are going to go up significantly. You could have timberland, right? And conversely, on the income side, you can also have property. You can have specialist funds like agricultural funds, okay, and so on, and sukuks. You can have all of that within your income bucket. And as an investor, you typically need a combination of both. Something that's going to give you growth and something that's going to give you income. And depending upon your particular circumstances and your particular return objectives, coming back to our example of this Haji who put his or her name down on the Hajj list, but he only has 75,000 rand, he or she needs 15% growth per annum to be able to get the 150,000 rand in 5 years' time, which is typically, Allah knows best, the waiting time now before you can actually go on Hajj. So if they take 5 years before their name gets called and it grows at 15% per annum, what is going to give them the best shot at doubling their money? A growth portfolio, isn't it? Whereas if they put all their money in something that's only going to give them an income return, now give or take 7%, 8%, it's going to take them much longer to double their money.
Absolutely. And I think you explained it exceptionally well. Thank you for taking the time to do that. So Salih, with these types of Sharia-compliant investments available to our community, and with the performance of the Sharia-compliant investments being on par with conventional, or in some cases and in a lot of cases, actually outperforming the conventional investments, why do you think, or what do you think is the reason for maybe the lack of exposure or the lack of uptake or flows into these types of solutions?
That's also a very deep question. I think one of the key issues I think us as a collective community need to engage on actively is the need for financial literacy. And more broadly, let's call it investment literacy. So when our kids go to school, or us even when we go to university, outside of those who can study finance, we don't have a basic literacy around investments or around finance. Our education system doesn't really give us the necessary tools to be able to do that. I just heard now, my son said at school they did maths lit. One of the groups of students did maths literacy. So the other group of students, of which he was one, did normal maths, but another group did maths literacy. So yes, not everybody wants to necessarily specialize in maths, but they need to have some kind of literacy around maths, and that's why they created maths literacy. We need to have finance and investment literacy as well. And I think our community as a whole, we understand property, we understand, those of us who are entrepreneurs, we understand entrepreneurship. We don't necessarily have that deep understanding around investment literacy. At the same time, the investment industry as a whole, I have to admit, and I'm part of that, so the blame also falls on us, is that we use too much jargon. And this jargon acts as a huge barrier to understanding. And people don't buy what they don't understand. And I think we really have to simplify things as much as possible for the Muslim consumer. Because once they understand, every Muslim wants to please Allah. That's our belief. If they understand that this is a path to pleasing Allah, and you frame it in a way that takes away the jargon, that demystifies things, I fundamentally believe that the uptake would be much higher than it is. That being said, because of the explosion of social media, people are able to quickly go onto YouTube or TikTok or whatever it is to find out things that they don't necessarily understand. So in that way, they can also empower themselves. But I think really the hurdle is education. In addition to that, as you rightly point out, that Sharia-compliant investments, halal investments, Islamic investments, they have provided very, very competitive returns compared to, as you call it, conventional investments. And in fact, in certain instances, they've actually outperformed them. So, for example, over over the last 10 years, right? We all know that, for example, the global markets have done exceptionally well. Now, did you know that the global Sharia index has done about almost 12% per annum in US dollar terms? But the conventional index, the conventional one, meaning the one that's not Sharia compliant, has done a return 2% less, 9.6%. Not 2%, you think, that's not a lot. But that's 2% per year. It's not just 2%, it's 2% per year. And you compound that 2% on top of 2% on top of 2% over 10 years, well, actually it becomes a huge difference in wealth creation. So Muslims really, really need to try and educate themselves as far as investment literacy is concerned. And us as an industry, as a collective industry, the banking and finance industries, we also need, not only on the Sharia side, but even generally on the conventional side, we have to do a huge amount of education and trying to demystify all of these concepts for the consumer.
No, 100%. I think, Solly, you made a very good point in terms of the jargon that's being used. And then from an Islamic banking perspective, Islamic investment perspective, you also have that almost like a double-edged sword where you've got this jargon, this industry jargon, and then you have this Islamic terminology as well, which further confuses the community. So it becomes very difficult for people to understand. And you mentioned it that if once people don't understand something, that they tend to stay away from it. So
absolutely. So you've hit the nail on the head, and it's one of my pet. Let's call it peeves.
Yeah.
Right? Pet peeves. We've you have complication squared. Because you got jargon on top of jargon.
Correct.
Right?
100%.
And we don't live in an Arab society. We don't live in an Arab society. Our first language is not Arabic, right? Why are we using Arabic terminology to explain, sukuk, ijara, salam, we have all these different concepts, mudaraba, musharaka, we have all of these different concepts that we are using, and we're building it on top of already complex traditional sort of financial terminology. We build this on top of that. So now the poor Muslim consumer or investor who already doesn't have high investment literacy, I mean, this is not I'm not saying this as a value judgment, it just means they haven't been trained that way. Just like I don't have necessarily high medical literacy, but if the doctor took his or her time to really try and explain something, I could understand it. So we have all of this jargon, and then we expect the Muslim investor to be able to make an informed choice. No, we are disempowering them. We really have to take away the jargon, simplify the concepts and the terminology. And that's why I've tried to make my answers as simple as possible, not to dumb things down, but one of the key, in a sense, neglected sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ was that he ﷺ would change his speech, even his Arabic dialect, depending upon the nature of the audience.
Correct.
So if the audience spoke a slightly different Arabic dialect, he would change his Arabic to meet their dialect. Now no matter what our profession is, we need to practice that sunnah. We say, okay, this audience is not a finance audience. How do I speak in a way that they can understand?
Correct.
Or this audience is not a medical audience. How do I speak in a way that they can understand? And if we do that, I'm confident, inshallah, that we would be able to reach the hearts and minds more effectively of the aspiring Muslim investor.
So, Alec, do you also feel that with the Islamic terminologies and the jargons we just spoke about, do you also feel that in a way that it also alienates our Islamic product or solutions? Because as we know, the Islamic investments, the Islamic finance, is not only for Muslims. It's open to anybody from any faith. But then you have, these like the diminishing musharaka, mudaraba, ijara, these terminologies floating around, and it's already tough for our Muslims to take these products up. What about the non-Muslims or people from other faiths?
And this may sound controversial, but we have, as a collective industry, we have done a huge disservice to Islamic finance, in my opinion, by doing that. Firstly, because we have not been super sensitive to the context that we are living in, to the context of the actual audience that we are engaging with, and at the same time, we must also remember that our Prophet ﷺ was rahmatan lil alamin, not rahmatan lil muslimin, right? Rahmatan lil alamin. So, if we put up these barriers to understanding, that also means then that, for example, the non-Muslim investor, they are left with the overwhelming perception that these products are not for them, right? That these products are only for Muslims. Of course, we do understand that there are Muslims, non-Muslims, who are investing in Islamic banking products and Islamic finance products and investment products, but they tend to be the minority. And it is our collective responsibility to make sure that we also reach the hearts and minds of that audience.
100%.
And part of that dawah is, once again, to just change our method of delivery, how we label these things, how we educate the consumer, the terminology that we use, and so on and so forth.
One of the things that's interesting to me about Islamic investment specifically is the concept around, so if we use a concept that's quite well known right now, which is another acronym I'm going to throw out there, is going to be ESG, environmental, social governance. Right? With Islamic investments, there's always been that ESG element, or you might call it something else, right? From an Islamic perspective.
Yes.
But it's always been there. And when we look at investments lately and how they've changed to have that ESG flavor, can you maybe talk to the audience about how Islamic investments have always kind of had this element of being environmentally friendly, of having that social responsibility, of making sure that there's that governance aspect within the investment portfolios, within the investments that are chosen within the portfolios. Maybe talk about the if you could maybe just give us an understanding of the different concepts, but how maybe and some of the similarities between the two as well.
Absolutely. So, as you rightly point out, over the last 2 decades, there has been a significant rise within the investments community of a concept called ESG. And it's, I don't know who created the acronym. It's not, the 3 concepts coming together are not necessarily logically consistent, but it stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. From another perspective, it's really trying to consider, let's call it non-financial information, non-financial data in the assessment of an overall investment and its suitability. Now, from the Islamic side of things, if you think of we have a concept called tayyib. Tayyib. So when we as a Muslim consumer, if you will, it is important for us, number one, let's use food, because we all understand food, right? Your listeners would understand food. We want to all eat halal, right? We want to all eat halal. And that is, of course, our religious obligation, is that we have to eat food that is halal. But what tayyib does, this concept, tayyib, what this concept does is, okay, it says, no, not only must it be halal, meaning that it must meet the minimum legal standards, it must also be good and beneficial. And in fact, that this concept is broader than just ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. It is really meant to consider, now think about food again. You have, on the one hand, somebody offers you a really, really good, let's call it a Wembley hot dog. We all know it's halal. Okay, I'm not advertising for Wembley, right? A Wembley hot dog. Or on the other hand, they offer you an exceptionally healthy poke bowl. Now, the Wembley hot dog is absolutely, it's halal. And it's tasty. But the poke bowl, it's actually not only is it going to be halal, it's going to be extremely good for your health as well. So when we as an investor, we also need to consider, is this particular investment that we are making, not only does it meet the minimum requirements of the law, but is it in fact beneficial? Is it in fact impactful? Is it in fact making a positive contribution towards communities, towards societies in which it operates, in every aspect of their operations? And that is what is important. And clearly I must be hungry, which is probably why I'm talking about food. Let's use one final example. Coffee. If you were to consume a cup of coffee, on the one hand, the one has been sourced by child labor in Africa. And the other set of coffee beans has come from a supply chain where that has been verified that actually that every part of that supply chain has met the highest standards of health and safety, hygiene, as well as no use of child labor. Both of them outwardly are the same, but in reality they are worlds apart. And us as the Muslim consumer, we should be taking the one where we are confident that the supply chain has been in a sense verified, that it's transparent, that there's no use of child labor, that they're not using toxic chemicals to pollute the crops, etc., etc. And that level of scrutiny, that level of due diligence is what it is important to consider in the totality of whether this investment is not only halal, but tayyib as well.
Absolutely, that's so powerful. And that's exactly the type of message that we want to get across to our audience. Salih, we really appreciate your time. Shukran so much. If there was one final message that you could give to our audience when it comes to Islamic investing, in less than 1 minute, what would that be?
I will conclude with the words of Charlie Munger.
Okay.
So the best investment that you can make is in yourself. And we as Muslims have lost, unfortunately, the art and the love of reading. And knowledge compounds. If you read every day a little bit, just a little bit, 1 page, 2 pages a day. Over time, over a lifetime, can you imagine how many thousands of books that you would have actually read? And that knowledge compounds, right? Knowledge upon knowledge upon knowledge upon knowledge. And ultimately, that would actually be beneficial for you, not only in your life, in your investments, needs and objectives, but also make you a better person and make you more impactful in your families, your communities. Just that act of iqra, reading, but every day. Compound knowledge. Read a little bit every day.
Salih, we could sit here for the next 2 hours and continue speaking. Shukran so much for the time. We really appreciate it. And we hope to have you back, on our podcast soon, so we can explore more about the investment world and Sharia investments as well.
And there we have it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.